You might expect that the battle between Elon Musk and the Anti-Defamation League, in which Musk accuses the ADL of weaponizing accusations of anti-Semitism for political purposes, would be about the rightful limits to free speech. And it is indeed true that the vast majority of censorship practice on the pretext of hate speech or disinformation targets conservatives, and that these concepts have been outrageously politicized by the left. And this was most obvious when Twitter and other social media refused to publish stories about Hunter Biden's laptop. Their decision affected the outcome of the 2020 election, forcing Trump out of the White House. But in fact, the situation is even worse. We are dealing not only with an encroachment on free speech, but with the dismantling of the rule of law itself. Most people, even liberals, agree that some speech acts should be illegal. Incitement to violence, the divulging of official secrets, or malicious libel, for example. However, what the battle over Twitter shows is that the limits to free speech are no longer set by the law, but instead by lobbies. If a provider decides that certain content should be suppressed, that is not a legal decision, but instead a personal one made by the publisher. It is not subject to any judicial review. The person being censored has no right to defense, nor to any other independent procedure. This is the opposite of the rule of law. And even worse, the European Union has recently introduced its Digital Services Act, which elevates this dangerous principle, previously enacted by private companies, to the status of law, which the EU Commission will enforce. But this is law in name only. The definition of law is that it defines what actions are forbidden and says what penalties or punishments people will incur if they violate it. But what the Digital Services Act will do is to police people in advance by imposing fines on the big service providers if they do not obey the EU's instructions on what may or may not be said. When people are taken down from Twitter or YouTube, they are prevented from speaking at all, and not just punished for one specific violation. Now, the Digital Services Act will mean that the unelected commission in Brussels will get to be judge, jury, and executioner about what people may or may not say in Europe. That is the opposite of democracy. Now, the Commission says it wants to make the internet a safe space, but in reality it wants to control it. And control is the opposite of freedom, especially when it is by bureaucrats and not by judges operating according to the law.